it's Natasha and thank you so much for joining me today. I just wanted to have a play today with some ripped paper techniques because it is so easy, and given some paper and some ink, you're away laughing. So I am going to start off. This is some cardstock here. I think it's maybe £100. I don't like it for card making. I did buy it and thought that it might be good for me to use. However, I don't really love it, so that's what I'm using up. However, copy paper works just fine for this as well. I've used that in previous videos. And I'm ink blending onto a piece of Tim Holtz watercolor paper because, as I've said in many videos, I love all the help I can get when I'm ink blending, and that paper helps me. So I'm going to use Mowed Lawn, Hickory Smoke, Ripe Persimmon, Abandoned Coral, and Seedless Preserves as my color palette today. I wanted to do something just slightly different. I wasn't really following any rhyme or reason as to why I chose those colors. Then I'm going to add some removable adhesive onto just the outside edge, just a little bit there, and you can see if I kind of move it around, you can see that there's a little bit tacked on. And I am just eyeballing where I want to put this to get my first layer of ink. Now I have a whole pile of these kind of pieces here which were offcuts, and as I said, this is cardstock that I didn't end up liking for card making, so I'm just making use of it, and I'm just tearing anywhere. Now I tear kind of away from me, and that way you get the edge that I want to use, and it will be the same edge for all of them. I'm using some finger daubers for ink blending because this is a relatively small space, but you could definitely use brushes or any mini ink blending tools or anything like that. And I'm definitely trying to get a blended out look, sort of an ombre, darker at the top, and then moving on to light. And then between the colors, there will almost be a tiny wee slither of white. So this means that I don't really have to worry about which colors I am putting next to each other. As I said, I was just sort of having fun. I picked some fun colors and a couple that I don't use, and I wanted to incorporate them all into this card. So it doesn't matter because I'm not blending them together. And then I just kind of chose pieces. Most of my little ripped pieces kind of have a very slight curve to them or a little bit of texture, and that was what I was going for. I didn't want them to kind of curve up, curve down. But in saying that, you could try it out and it could look really, really gorgeous. So give it a go. So now I'm moving on to Hickory Smoke. The first one was the Mowed Lawn color, and so I have gone green and then grey, and then I'm going to go into some really fun colors as well. And as I said, there was no rhyme or reason as to what colors I chose. I just liked these colors, and a couple of them I don't use super often, so that was fun. So I just start with my little finger dauber, and I often start on the strip of paper, and then I blend onto my card front, and I definitely go much heavier on the ink up the top and then blend it down towards the other color. And again, you can see that I am leaving a tiny little bit of white space, and it kind of, I mean, you could definitely make a scenery or a picture out of this, and then you could stamp on some silhouette stamping on the front. I think that would look really gorgeous as well. That's not the direction that I'm going to take this card in today, but I do think that would work well. I also think that this technique leaves it open for any occasion at all. And again, you can lean towards any colors you want to, whether they be darker colors or lighter or warmer colors or cooler colors. You could use this for anything. So it really is a fun technique, and I love the look. And I think that little white strip that's left in between each one definitely makes it, and it does mean that I don't have to worry about blending, which I said before, so that is handy in this technique. I am using Seedless Preserves up the top, and then this was going to be my last color. However, when I took off this piece of paper up here, I kind of felt like the top was empty and I hadn't intended it to look that way. So when I'm having a look at it now, I thought, yeah, I just need to add something up the top. So I didn't bother getting out a new ink pad. I just used one of my finger daubers, which is a blue one, and it had some ink left on it, which I think might even be the blueprint sketch color. So I just gently added a little tiny bit of ink blending up the top, remembering that this would be the very lightest part from the colouring up the top if there were to be another colour carried on. So once I have that blue there, I feel like it is much more complete, and that is my background panel, and I really like it. I think it is bright, but we're going to work on that too. So this is a die set that I purchased. These are standalone dies, and I think they're called Dainty Blossoms, and I am going to pick one of these today. You have been seeing a lot of these in my videos because, as you guys know, once I purchase or invest in something, I really want to get the most use out of it. So when I saw this set here, I knew that you can use it for silhouette shapes. I could use it for the outline shapes. I've used it in lots of videos already. So if you go back through recent videos on my channel, you'll see this one used again and again. But for today, I have die cut it out of actually the same cardstock that I used for tearing the paper. So it is about £100 or so. Then I'm going to use some VersaMark ink, which is a sticky embossing ink. And I'm going to pop some gold embossing powder over top. Now this is the Ranger Superfine embossing powder, but any will work for this, and you could also use any color. I thought that actually a copper color might be really nice, but ended up going for gold. I am going to melt this with just the first layer, and you can definitely stop here. This looks really, really nice, and I like the look of just one layer. But when I'm doing kind of a focal piece with embossing powder, I tend to like embossing it several times, and that just gives it that almost slightly dimensional, rounded edges. It just kind of appeals to me. So I am going to do the same thing, pop it back down on my VersaMark ink pad, and then dip it back into the embossing powder. And I'm actually going to end up doing this 3 times. It kind of almost looks kind of like a faux metal embellishment once you are finished. But as I said, this is completely not necessary at all. And you can see it has really gorgeous shine, and it is going to be the focal point on the front of my card. I would really love to see all of your versions of this technique if you have given this a go. And a really good place to show me is on my Facebook page. We are so lucky to have the most amazing group of people over there. They are so supportive and really encouraging and positive. So I will leave a link to that down in the description box below, as well as the links to any products that I can find. I do my best to link everything. However, if something is discontinued or is no longer available, I really do apologize. I know it's frustrating, but it's really good to make the most out of our supplies, and it doesn't matter whether they are discontinued or not. So I do apologize if that's the case, but I will try and find as many things as I can. And the links to those will be in the description box below this video. So here I have got 2 banner dies. Now the only reason I'm doing 2 is because I couldn't decide which size looked right for me. So I die cut both of them out, and I actually end up using the wider one. So here is, I'm going to add a little bit more gold embossing just to tie everything together. Now these are 2 Distress pens from Ranger, and they are embossing pens. They come in a 2-pack. You could also use your VersaMark ink pad, whichever works for you, and you can see that these have a little stitching detail, and so that is going to guide me for where I'm going to just add my little lines. I want there to be a really nice border around the outside. As I said, you could also just use your VersaMark ink pad, and then that way you could kind of just brush the edges with the actual ink pad. But for this, it was just nice and easy to use a ruler and a pen. The 2-pack of embossing pens comes with a brush tip and a bullet tip, so I'm using the brush tip one here. If you didn't want to do any embossing at all, you could also just cut one of the banners that is one size larger than this one if you had a set, and then you could just layer them up and cut it out in some gold cardstock and layer them up one in front of the other. But just because I really like my golds to be matching, I usually try and use the same embossing powder or the same product throughout the whole card, and then that way it doesn't kind of appear that I've got different shades of gold going on. So I'm just going to melt the outside of this with my heat gun, and again, this step isn't really necessary. It's just kind of making the gold appear in more than one place than just on that die cut. Now, I had heaps and heaps of fun creating this card. I created a whole bunch, and my daughter was also creating them alongside me, so she had fun with this technique. It's definitely something that you could share with kids or with beginning crafters. And you can kind of take it in whatever direction you want to go. You don't have to add the banner and things on the front. You could just do, as I said, some silhouette stamping, or you could just have a nice wee vellum circle with a little overlay and a little sentiment in the middle. I mean, there is heaps and heaps of options. So here I am going to add my little sentiment, and I'm just going to stamp it with some VersaFine Onyx Black ink using the letterette stamp set called All the Small Things. Again, I have used this one to death just because it has so many really good words that you can pop together. Now here I'm again using the same embossing powder because when I was thinking about the design I wanted for the card, I knew I wanted a couple of little gold strips, and as I said, if you had some gold paper you could definitely just cut the strips from that. But as I said earlier, I really like everything to be the same tone and same shade of gold. So that's why I'm going to the effort of just embossing this little piece of cardstock here. And then I am just going to use my trimmer to get a couple of really fine strips, and these will go down either side of my panel. Now when I was thinking about cutting down my card front that we created with the ripped paper and the ink, I wanted to kind of keep as much of it as I could. I knew I didn't want to lose that blue from up the top because I really like that. However, I do really like having borders on cards as well. So all I decided for this card is to cut a little bit off the edge, and then that way it would end up being about 3 3/4 by 5.5 inches, just roughly. I didn't measure, I was just kind of cutting off enough so that I could add some little gold strips. Then here I did just cut out by hand some fun foam, and I thought I wanted to pop up that strip that was going to go, the banner that was going to go in front of my card here. So I'm gluing this down onto a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch card front, and then I didn't like how much it was popped up. It just didn't kind of look right. So in the end I ended up tearing it off and just add a little bit more liquid glue. This is the Ranger Multi-Medium in the matte finish, and I just pop it into these little glue bottles, and it's a really nice strong adhesive and gives me that wiggle time when I use the liquid glue, so that is definitely my go-to in my craft room. I'm going to hold the banner down until it's nice and adhered and then cut off the top. Then run my glue bottle down the sides, either side of my card front strip there, just adding a tiny little bit of glue, enough that I can adhere down those gold strips. And again, this is kind of just bringing that gold theme into all of the elements of the card. So the strip is longer than what I need for my card, but I'm going to just run the glue up, pop them both down, and then I will glue the focal element right in front of that banner as well. And everything is pretty flat. There's no dimension or no foam tape in this card, but there is a couple of layers of cardstock, but it will go through the mail just fine. I did need to cut down my little embellishment. It was a little bit tall for what I needed, and again the liquid glue is perfect for adhering down these embossed elements. And in case you are wondering, when I buy the matte medium, it does come in a jar, and I pop it into these smaller bottles. There is a video on my channel that shows exactly how I get it into these small bottles with very little mess and no stress at all. So even if you just search on YouTube how to fill a glue bottle, it will be the first one that pops up, so that you're able to see a really nice, easy, quick way to refill these glue bottles. Now, as I was just looking at this here, I'm going to cut off those ends of the tiny little glue strips, and then I'm just looking at it and I realized something. Did anyone else notice that I actually glued the front panel on upside down? So I think I was intending it to be up this way when I did the inking, but for whatever reason I clearly wasn't concentrating and I glued it on this way. But I must admit, I kind of like it either way. There's no rhyme or reason to it, so it looks fine both ways to me, I think. Thank you so much for joining me today. Please hit the thumbs up button if you enjoyed this video, and make sure that you are subscribed, and I really look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thanks, bye!